Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. And, as we're recording this, I've actually been reporting a breaking news story about Governor Doug Burgum being injured just before the national GOP debate, which puts us in a quandary because I don't know later in the show after we get done talking with my first guest, West Fargo, a member of the West Fargo City Council, Mark Simmons, excuse me. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning.
No worries.
But we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show, and I'm almost hesitant to talk about it because by the time you listen to this, everything that we assume or that we guess at might turn out to be wrong. Who knows? I don't know. But we're going to do this show. The first part of the show, we're going to focus on a story that I've been writing a lot about, which is Epic Companies, which is a company with a statewide footprint. They're in a lot of communities across the state, and they do a lot of things. I mean, they do construction, they do real estate development, they do property management, they book events. Here in Minot, they own the Norse Kustfest, which is a Scandinavian festival. So they got their fingers in a lot of pies. And then also West Fargo Events, which is a nonprofit that was formed, like the paperwork was filed by Epic Companies, that is used by the city of West Fargo to manage, to do some things. Among them, managing the parking garage at a development, an entertainment district called The Lights. And from there's been all sorts of stuff going on. I have written critically of this situation, saying that the relationship between West Fargo Events and Epic Companies looks a little too cozy. While writing about that, also it came up that there was a parking dispute between two of the developers, Mr. Jim Bullis, who was a previous guest of this podcast. He has the Northern Lights development. He says, and I have now confirmed, by the way, with information from the city of West Fargo, confirmed that he owns an entire floor, or doesn't own, I should say, leases, has rights to an entire floor of parking in a parking ramp between the Lights and his Northern Lights development. That's something that Epic Companies has disputed. They put out a statement claiming that Mr. Bullis doesn't necessarily have the rights that he says. Anyway, it's turned into a whole mess. Here to talk with us about that is Mark Simmons, like I said, member of the West Fargo City Council, also on the board for West Fargo Events. Mark, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Let's try to get some stuff straightened out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Rob, before we get in, Commissioner, I want to let people know your background. Can you let them know what your past and current position with the city of West Fargo has been? You've been on the commission for some time, is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, I've been a commissioner for 19 years now, so I've been there a long time. I've been there basically through every development we have done in the last 19 years, which is many, many developments. I think we've almost tripled our size since I got on board. As you mentioned, I'm also the police and fire commissioner. Been that for a long time.
That's your portfolio on the city commission.
That's my portfolio on the city commission, and then I am the president of the board of West Fargo Events, and I've been that since basically we founded it. 4 years ago we started this, something like that.
Now you've seen. I guess let's get into it here. You've seen some of the reporting about West Fargo Events and Epic Companies. I'm assuming you disagree with it, but from an outsider looking in, I got to say, when I see that, you have the president of Epic Companies on the board of West Fargo Events, and I understand. I think Mr. Bullis has a business partner who's also on the board, but I don't know. I'm looking at this nonprofit and wondering if it's too lopsided, if it's too cozy with Epic Companies. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I will tell you, Epic Companies does a lot for West Fargo Events. It does a lot for the city of West Fargo. I mean, they donate a lot. They help out a lot. They've done a lot of projects, very good projects. So, yes, they are our friends without a doubt. Todd Burning does sit on the board, but he doesn't make the decisions about West Fargo Events. You know, we have, again, every entity, and we did that on purpose. When we formed this board, we wanted every entity involved because we felt that that's the best communication that we could get things done. And it's worked out very successfully, Rob and Ben. You know, sometimes when you're at the top of the hill, people try to take you down. And that's just the way life is. And I mean, we have, I think, I never dreamed we would be where we're sitting today 4 years ago. I mean, we were very successful. We've done, like we do over 130 events a year for the community, not for Epic. We do it for the community. Epic is not involved in those events other than the major concerts, Rob and Ben. That's their stuff. That's not West Fargo Events. They lease the plaza from us, just like US Bank leases it. You know, there's all kinds of companies that lease that plaza to have their private parties.
And when you say we started it 4 years ago, are you referring to the city commission, the board? Who all's involved in?
So I'm going to get a little confused here, and I'll have to explain it. But because as Rob, I sent you that letter. I in my eyes, I wear two hats. I wear the city commission hat,
okay,
and I wear the board president hat. And I know I have to somewhat separate them, but I am very proud of what we've done. So a lot of times I have the board when I'm talking. I have the West Fargo board hat on. When I say we, it was me, Mayor Madron, Todd Burning, Jim Bullis was part of those conversations back when we started this. And to be very honest with you, we didn't have a clue that we were going to start a nonprofit. We actually put it out for RFPs for other, nonprofits to come and run it. It wasn't our initial plan. And when we did that, the only one we got back, in all honesty, was the Fargo Park Board. And we didn't want the Fargo Park Board running a West Fargo entity. Our own park board didn't want to run it. They don't like to get involved in any of that stuff. Why? That's why the school district has, the arena as well. And so that's kind of how it started. And then we decided, hey, let's form our own. We think we can do it if we get all the entities together. We could communicate and we could be successful. And again, it has been very successful, guys.
Let me run down a list for you. When the paperwork was formed for West Fargo Events, the nonprofit, it was filed with the North Dakota Secretary of State by Todd Burning and Epic Companies. It was using and has until just recently used an address based in Minot that's at an Epic Companies property. The forms were filed by an Epic Company employee, erroneously listing Epic Company employees as the board of directors, which was a false statement to the North Dakota Secretary of State. Mike Amundsen, the executive director of West Fargo Events, says that Epic Companies provides the accounting for West Fargo Events. Epic Company also uses West Fargo Events to sponsor charitable gaming at least one of its locations. I think the new Holiday Inn that it just purchased in Fargo. Epic Companies built the Lights venue that West Fargo Events manages. Epic Companies books events at that venues. Epic Company owns a lot of the property around that venue. Hearing all that, you don't think that anybody could look at there and say, gosh, maybe does West Fargo Events exist just to produce commerce for Epic Companies?
I can see where people would think that, but when they look into the books and when they look in to see what we do, we have changed everybody's mind that looks into that, Rob. I mean, when you're referring way back to initially the state,
I think it was 2017.
2017. That was prior to us forming our board. Even that was kind of what they were getting going. We were not a part of that part of it. But what happened is their gal who does this stuff, she just kind of pasted and copied all this. It was an innocent error. It was nothing to do with our board. I mean, we have again 2 city commissioners, 2 school district, 2 park board. we have people on there that have credibility. That was an error and a mistake. And when I think you pointed it out, we changed it right away. As far as the address goes, when we first started, we actually were in the arena. We didn't have a place, so that's why that was the address on there. We didn't have an office even. We worked out of pretty much the locker rooms of the West Fargo Arena. When we originally started, we had no money. We had nothing to start with. So,
Mark, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was when I read that editorial from Jim Bullis. He's been a developer around Fargo and West Fargo, our region, for a very long time. And typically what I have seen is they don't like to make waves because they always want, even if they don't get a piece of land or a zone, a parcel zone the way they want to kind of live to fight another day sort of thing. And it's not that his letter was an end all be all, but it was spicy. When I read it, it was a whoa. I was surprised he was not just putting that out there, but then kind of going off his way to put it out there in a newspaper. And then he was good enough to come on with us and discuss his thoughts. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was he name checked you multiple times. And I thought, okay, well, he said Mark's name. Let's get him on. Can you speak to why you think from a city commission standpoint, how he got to where he was in that editorial on the relationship of the city and Epic, and where kind of his critiques come down? And then I know Rob wanted to, or we both wanted to ask you about the numerous elected members on the board and what inspired that.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, he's frustrated. I get that with the parking issue. He's very frustrated. We're frustrated too. It's a complicated contracts. I know you guys got some of them. West Fargo Events doesn't have a contract with the Northern Lights or Epic. It's actually with the city. So it was written a little bit different. And their job, Mike's job, is to basically run and maintain the parking ramp. Now, he has 104 spots, and those are his spots.
You're talking about Jim Bullis has 104 spots.
Yeah, I'm talking about Northern Lights. Is that what you want to talk about, Ben?
Yeah.
So there's no question about it. We don't dispute the spots, right? The problem we have is trying to maintain people from parking in those spots. Okay, it's a difficult thing, and let me give you an example of why things make it even more difficult. So in North Dakota, we have a major problem. We all want to park by the door, right? To any event we go to, you want to park by the door. You guys have both, I'm sure, been to a Twins or a Vikings game, right? When I go down there, I stay at the Mall of America and I take the tram.
Mm-hmm.
But in North Dakota, you want to park right by that front door. And so what happens is he's got 104 reserved spots for his people, right? But I went there a couple of weeks ago and I counted 24 of his vehicles that were on the first floor because they get to walk right across the street. So now that's not only taking up 104, it's also taken up another 24 spots. And that's part of the problem we have, trying to decipher, trying to figure out how we can give him his spots without other people parking there, number one. And number two, having his people making sure that they're parking in those spots.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit, because what he said is he said that at one point there was a city administrator that came and took down the signs he had on that level, his level that he has reserved. And by the way, I was able to confirm. Todd Burning came out and he issued a statement last week, which claimed that, insinuated that Northern Lights, because let's back this up. This is so complicated.
Yeah,
Jim Bullis says he has a contract. He has 104 spaces, basically one floor of the parking ramp, and that the city of West Fargo, which has contracted with West Fargo Events to manage the parking ramp, can preempt that parking for 5 nights a year. Now, I have confirmed that with Assistant City Administrator Dustin Scott. I have an email in front of me right now where he said that's true. That's the case. Todd Burning put out a statement saying basically it's not true. They're allowed to preempt it for 50 nights a week. Basically the city's saying that's false. That's not wrong. Jim says West Fargo Events keeps preempting my parking. They've done it 30 times this year. He said that they've actually sent him a schedule where they're scheduling, preempting his parking for 34 times this year. Last time I spoke with him, he said they had done it 30 times this year, and they're doing it in violation of his contract, and they're doing it in favor of Epic. What's your response to that?
So first of all, we have not done that 30 times a year, and I'd like to see that schedule that he got that says we have, because I've never seen no schedule like that.
Okay.
We're not doing anything for Epic. Epic doesn't even have one reserve spot, Rob and Ben, in there. And keep in mind, and again, Jim is a good guy. He's frustrated. He's a developer. Ben, you know me over the years. I work with all the developers. I work very hard with all of our businesses. I always have. That's important to me. We have to succeed.
And for non-West Fargo listeners to know, over the course of Mark's time on the commission, the city's doubled in population?
Almost tripled.
Yeah.
And so is our businesses, by the way. I mean, we have done a great job. I could ramble off Costco, all kinds of them that have come. So I'm very proud of what I've done over the years and still working hard to do even more. So getting back to Jim, he pays $25,000 a year. I think he told you that for those 104 spots, right? Epic pays $150,000 and they don't even get one reserved spot. So I don't understand how anyone could say that we're catering, to Epic.
Well, I think Jim. I think what Jim's saying is because he showed me the contract. Both Todd Burning and Jim and Jim Bullis signed those contracts. It's a 30-year. I think it's a 30 or 35-year contract. If Todd Burning doesn't like the contract now, why did he sign it?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't part of the contract signing on. Yeah, I seen them. I've seen both signatures on them, but I wasn't privy to those private meetings. We only did the city ones, and then of course the West Fargo one. I don't know though how Jim is saying that what we're doing is in bed with Epic or helping Epic. We only block off. We just had those concerts, so we have about 5 concerts a year. That's when we block them off. Now we do have, Kidchella, different things in that plaza, and people pull into the parking lots, and we try to guide them. Here's an example. Here's a good example. So the last, I think it was that Kidchella or whatever deal we had. It was huge, right? So we had people in the parking ramp. I think we had 10 or 15 people guiding the cars now to the top of the ramp, right, to park, past Jim's spot, right? What happens is there's a line of cars, and people are in line, and we're trying to guide them, and they see that open spot, and they pull in there. They don't care about a ticket anymore or nothing. They just pull in there. So what do we do? I mean, does Jim want us to start towing them people? I mean, that's where we got to sit down.
Yeah. I think that's the disconnect between what you're saying and what Jim's saying, because Jim is saying West Fargo Events is planning to take those spots. Like no. West Fargo Events is sudden. That's what he says. And so far, everything that he's told me has proven accurate. So I don't know. That's what he's saying.
Do you have the schedule?
Well, you might have to call Jim about it. He says he's got it, where West Fargo Events has told him.
But he hasn't sent that to you.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. That's what he has said, though.
So he sent you everything but that schedule. That's kind of odd, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Another thing, Todd Burning also sent out a statement saying that Jim Bullis hadn't built a parking ramp that he was obliged to build. And it turns out he did build it. I have that confirmation from Dustin Scott as well. I think Todd in his statement said, well, if you drive by the Northern Lights development, you can plainly see he hasn't built the parking ramp. Bullis told me that's because he built it under the building, and the city signed off on that 3 years ago. So, he's been pretty consistent. I would be surprised, and maybe that's the next thing we need to get is that schedule. But he even said at one point, former city administrator Tina Fisk ordered his signs taken down for his parking spots.
Okay, so I could tell you what happened there as well. Okay. So what the deal was there is he had put them all up, and I actually went myself and counted. And when he had those signs up, it came to 112 because of the way he put the signs. The people would assume he had from, the right so far to the left. and he had them in the corners of, and no fault of his, I'm not saying that at all, but they were in the corners of the doors that go, to the elevator to take you down to the plaza or whatever. And those need to be handicapped. That's where we have to put our handicap people. So we took them down and we just moved them and gave him, 104 spots. The signs are back up, and he has 104 spots. But we had to take him down and move some of those because they were assuming that that corner was his, and it wasn't. They have to be handicapped. That's what happened there, and it wasn't Malaysia. I mean, it was just it wasn't in mean or anything like that. It's just we had to have those handicap spots. That's all. And they're back up, and he's got his 104.
Yeah. Mark, taking a look at this and kind of pulling back a little bit, because this, a lot of this is about a specific dispute that we've been talking about with the parking. But when I read, and I was, going back to being kind of surprised by Jim's letter to the forum, when I looked at and I'm sorry because I'm going to get the terminology wrong. Is it the board for West Fargo Events that you're on, or is it also you and the other elected officials are also on the board for Epic?
No,
you're not. You're on the board for West Fargo
Events. We're not on any Epic boards.
Got it. Oh, that's important.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I initially thought it was like an Epic board, and I was like, why are so many elected officials on with this company's board? But can you clarify, or just can you kind of just expound, I guess, on what the reason was that so many members elected to West Fargo entities are on that board for the events? Because I think it's you and the mayor. Is there another commissioner? And then school board and park board are all on there, like members of?
Yep. So we have 2 commission members, 2 park board members, 2 school district members, and 3 people at large. And the reason we did those entities is because we wanted everybody to work together. We wanted to communicate and make sure that we were going down the right path, and that every entity, school district, park board, was happy with what we were doing and keeping in the knowledge. And to be honest with you, with the whole parking issue, that's part of the problem. I haven't talked to Jim in over 2 years. And so it's like, that's what we did not want to run into. We wanted the communication. We wanted to make sure that anytime we did anything, the school district and the park board were on board.
Would you say that's from a lack of Jim showing up to public meetings, or from a lack of outreach on the part of West Fargo Events to Bullis and his group?
I'm going to say it's all the above. We're all to blame here. There's nobody. I mean, we're to blame just as much as anybody else. The city is to blame. West Fargo Events is to blame, and Jim is to. We're all to blame. We just got to get together and get over this and meet and try to come up with some common ground how to fix it.
Do you feel like, I guess in hindsight, and I know you started the way you talk about starting West Fargo Events, and I should note, I fell backwards into this story. The reason I started writing about it was because of charitable gaming. And if you look back to the beginning of the year, I was writing a lot about charitable gaming because I thought it was really interesting that nonprofit organizations were buying for-profit businesses to protect their gambling interests.
And that's crazy,
Rob. And now I look at Epic, and now we have the reverse, where Epic was trying to found its own charity, not West Fargo Events, although it uses West Fargo Events, but was trying to start Epic Charities and got denied by the Attorney General's office because they couldn't find enough charitable purpose there.
They weren't active, I think.
So that's where I came to the story. And then I found West Fargo Events and was like, what is this? And so, I mean, to me, as somebody who's spent a lot of time writing about public, the interaction of government entities and nonprofit entities and the public, I looked at that and I thought, this is asking for trouble. That's me editorializing. Looking at this, do you think there needs to be a change in the way West Fargo Events is structured? Because I think the problem is you have a dispute between 2 developers. And let's be honest, that's not unusual. That stuff happens.
It's not.
That stuff happens. But the problem is now we're stuck adjudicating this dispute with a board where Epic's got a lot of fingers in West Fargo Events, and frankly, so does Mr. Bullis to some extent. Is there a way maybe to make the board more independent, or make the city of West Fargo through the board more independent of both of these developers?
So the issue is the parking. That's where this comes from. The independence of the board is absolutely independent. I don't know why you think that we're not independent. We do our own thing. The board.
Well, the president of Epic Companies is on the board, though. I mean, how can you be?
We have one person, Rob, on the board from Epic. That's it. And the other company has one person.
Should you have any? I mean, should any of the people from the companies be on the board?
I believe so, because they're part of the conversations. You talk about, like, I know you had a big deal about charity and Epic running, where we're at in the bar. The bar, as you already know, is owned by somebody else. But what about all these other bars that, don't you think that every bar gains by having gambling?
Absolutely.
It's just not Epic. I do agree with you. These people that are going out and actually buying businesses, that's wrong, and that's hurting everybody. Our charities goes to kids. You can ask, just put out a survey. We do so much for the city of West Fargo.
But what about a for-profit business that starts a nonprofit so that it can have gambling in a place that it, like a bar or a restaurant or a hotel that it owns?
I don't know. I guess that's kind of above my head. I would say as long as they give that money to the right places, to charity. If somebody wants to start a charity, who are we to say they can't do it, whether they make money in their business or not? If they want to start a charity and give money away to the poor or to whatever, what's wrong with that, I guess? I mean, I don't know. I don't think anything's wrong with that, but that's not our deal. That, we're not part of that, so.
Well, I guess I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a it can be a subjective thing, I guess. And part of it here, I think it's really interesting. I think this parking dispute is really interesting. What about, at one point, like I know there's going to be more development out in that area. Like there's a push towards permitting more of it. Is parking a concern? Because that was one thing that Mr. Bullis said, is that, Epic Company's not building enough parking. They're not planning for enough parking. He said one of the reasons why everybody's coming for his parking at Northern Lights is he built it. He secured enough parking for between what he built himself and under his building, and then the 30-year lease he has on the parking ramp. He says, I have enough parking. Is the city of West Fargo making a mistake in not requiring more parking out at that development?
Well, right now we have shared parking agreements with the school district. There's if you read that Walker report, I heard you got it. There's more parking than we need right now out there. The only time we would ever run short of parking is if we had two events, major events, one at the plaza, like a concert, and then a hockey, a big tournament. And ironically, when Walker did this report, they walked into that situation where we did have a tournament, which I don't think we've ever had one since that, since they did this report. But right now, the shared parking is ample parking. Again, the problem is everybody wants to park by the door. That's the problem in North Dakota we have. Now, we are looking right now, Rob and Ben, about doing the venue, like phase 2, right? That will have another parking ramp over there. So we will have, when we're done with all this, we will have ample parking. Again, the problem is, like I've stated many times, everybody wants to park by the front door. And we have to get over that. The last concert we had a bus run from the church, I think, Ben, you probably know, it's about a mile and a half down.
Yep.
Nobody took that bus. Not one person got on that bus.
They did not. Alas.
So what do we do,
And Mark, I did want to ask another response, I guess. But one of the things that Jim also mentioned was that he's talked to other developers and says that within the developer community, they are not as willing to approach the city of West Fargo with inquiries or I guess in general with new developments because of what he said is perceived to be a cozy relationship with Epic. Do you have any comments on that? Have you been in talks recently for the city with other developers on other major projects? A lot of that's subjective, what's a major project, but yeah, I want to get your response on it.
Sure. Thanks for asking. Right now we have one of the biggest projects we're doing downtown, minus the Epic stuff, is Junkyard Brewery, and that's Enclave. They've come downtown. That's going to open up hopefully very shortly. And that's going to be huge for West Fargo, because if you know Junkyard Brewery, they usually bring other businesses around them. And so, yeah, they're one that comes downtown. I don't know, we really don't have a lot of big developers that we work with anyway. We put out that RFP, right? That was one thing I think Jim mentioned. Nobody.
Yes, he did.
Right?
There was an RFP he mentioned that said, I believe he claimed that no other companies submitted besides Epic. Is that correct?
That is true. There was one other one that was going to, and then they decided not to, but it wasn't because they were afraid. It was because a lot of those companies don't have any P3 experience, private-public partnerships. And that's what we needed. And, I don't know that other than Epic, maybe Roar has that. I don't know. I don't know. Pardon?
I think so.
I know it's a unique deal. I'm very certain that other developers looked at this as hey, Epic did the lights and the continuity of keeping that same developer is, to me, highly recommended. I mean, just then you got that continuity from the Skyways and they all know kind of what they want to do, but we definitely would have looked at other developers just as good. We just didn't get any.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on and appreciate your time to hopefully bring some clarity. And we certainly wanted to get the other side of this. So I appreciate you coming on.
Well, you bet. Anytime. We have nothing to hide. So we will do whatever you guys want to ask for, paperwork. We'll give it to you. We are just want to be a successful nonprofit helping our community. That's all we want to do.
And I want to be clear, like I drove on my way back from Iowa, where I was covering Governor Burgum's campaign at the state fair. I drove by the venue. There was nothing going on when I drove by on Saturday afternoon, or nothing really that I saw going on. But it's a beautiful spot, and by all accounts, it's hugely popular. And kudos to you for that. I don't want to come off as the fun police here, but I think it's important the way the government do things the right way. I'm not convinced they're being done the right way here, but there's room for disagreement. Mark, I appreciate you coming on.
You bet. Thank you very much, both you guys.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
That was an important conversation to have, I think, because we had one side of the conversation on, and now we heard the other side. And those of you who are not in West Fargo may be wondering, why should I care about any of this? And I think the reason why is because we're in a period where the relationship between government and the private sector and the nonprofit sector is evolving very quickly. And charitable gaming is a big part of that. It was a part of this story. But it's also, our governments are trying to do some innovative things, and they should be commended for that. They should be commended for trying new things. But on the other side, there's still got to be accountability, and the government still has to be the government, which means the government can't be on anyone's side. The government belongs to all of us and has to treat us all equally. So I still have some concerns. I know, and I respect Mark Simmons. I have nothing. I'm not accusing him of doing anything nefarious at all. I disagree with him when he looks at this situation and says he doesn't see any conflicts or any problems. I just fundamentally disagree.
I think there's a lot of implications for the whole state in terms of charitable gaming, nonprofits creating and for-profits creating nonprofits to perform, I don't know what, to have charitable, I'm not finding the right words, charitable gaming. You heard Commissioner Simmons here just say that he doesn't agree that they should just be created solely to essentially run gambling. He also said, I thought correctly, that some of that is above his pay grade. Some of that is,
sure.
He didn't put it like that, but some of that is at the state legislative level. I do think that needs to be addressed specifically next time during legislative session. I think,
I'm
guessing Drew Wrigley won't be shy about coming in saying,
no,
I need some specific rules here, because he's had a pretty shiny sheriff's badge about this, but at the same time, I kind of agree with him, kind of putting his foot down pretty hard and saying,
he had a very
this far outside the line.
He had a very high profile case where a group of gaming distributors were essentially using a nonprofit called the Wall of Honor to generate business for themselves. And to bypass some of the, because the state has like a cap on, like if you own the bar and somebody wants to put electronic pull tab machines in your bar, they pay you rent. Well, that rent's capped, but they were getting around the cap by having the nonprofit pay to slap a TV monitor on the wall that showed pictures of veterans. And it was like, well, we'll pay you a bunch of money to put this monitor on the wall and also use us for charitable gaming and also use this company to manage your machines. I mean, those intersections, it's a lot of very interesting things happening. And to your point, Ben, we need to have a serious discussion about what we want charitable gaming to look like now that it's a $2 billion plus industry in our state.
And it's the classic debate about, but that goes between where does a bad faith take or motion on existing law that follows the letter of the law but not the spirit of it create the need to change the letter of the law. And I think we're getting pretty close to that here. And I think it's great that we had Mark Simmons on to speak about this individual dispute about a developer working with a city. And I know, again, to your point, well, if I don't live in West Fargo, why do I care? I think it's very important to know how these things go on behind the scenes, what level of transparency there is. And I was really glad to be able to have him on because I was glad to have Jim Bullis' take on it. But having been around local government, development and zoning disputes, it's always good to hear the whole story.
Well, also, I mean, every person can be participating in a debate in good faith and still have very different perspectives on how the situation looks. And it doesn't mean one side's right and one side's wrong. It just means, although I will say, the parking dispute, I don't know. It kind of feels like Jim Bullis was smart and secured enough parking for his development. Epic was not, and now there's a turf battle, and West Fargo Events is kind of caught in the middle. And I don't know. And some of the stuff with filing the paperwork for West Fargo, it's not that hard to file the paperwork. You don't have to be an attorney to file the paperwork to create a nonprofit. So some of that stuff where West Fargo Events was like, well, Epic just did it for us. I don't think Epic should be doing the accounting for West Fargo Events.
And I agree with you, and I found it, I don't know, I'm a little confused by the attitude of, well, it was a simple copy-paste mistake. These are legal founding documents. You don't make little simple mistakes on your mortgage papers when you sign them. You don't make them on your marriage license. Little mistakes. These are, come on, you got to pay attention. This is the time to pay attention to details.
So the Secretary of State's office has told me, because for years, an Epic employee filed false information with the Secretary of State's office listing the wrong people as the board of directors. Now, the Secretary of State's office said they've accepted a correction on that. As far as they're concerned, they're letting it go. They're not referring it for an investigation or anything like that. But that being said, it's not just a copy and paste thing. When you sign that document that you file with the Secretary of State's office, you're signing saying that this is true under potential criminal liability. So it's a bigger deal than they were making it out to be. So anyway, that's what that is. I think that's really interesting. I'm probably going to be writing a story here with the city of West Fargo coming back, indicating that the claims that Todd Burning from Epic made about the parking situation were false. And then I don't know where the story goes from there. And it's a little weird for me to be up in Minot covering this story down in West Fargo, but that's just kind of how I fall into these things sometimes.
But I don't think it's weird because I think it has implications for everybody, for taxpayers across the state.
I do think this is very much a Rob Port story. I do love these stories like this because I'm fascinated by these interactions between how government. This is really my type of story. I like this stuff.
There's a whole Robert Carroll book to be written about how development was done in the oil patch from about 2012 to 2017. And that's not even to say it was corrupt. It was just how the blending of these multinational big old money out of London, England, sometimes popping in and trying to buy up 17 acres because they found a story on CNN. And about the oil boom, and if you don't have someone like you covering it, there's sometimes people just don't know how things came to be very quickly in their own backyards.
Yeah.
But we have a couple other topics I know
Let's
that we need to cover involving the governor and I think, outrageously a Fargo Forum columnist, namely you, putting in what looks like naughty words into the forum's website, from what I'm seeing, about someone being very frustrated. There are asterisks instead of letters.
In my defense, are you outraged?
My pros are clutch.
I am a bit. I mean, because there's always a thing like how much do you quote that? I'm a big believer in pulling back the curtain, right? I mean, politics. Granted, in that case, we're talking about a Grand Forks city commissioner named Mark Rustad. And he was reacting to a previous column that I had written about property taxes around the state. And my contention that local governments, if they're not careful, are going to buy them a property tax abolition, whether they want it or not, because taxpayers are so ticked off about property taxes. We have another ballot measure it's going to be on the ballot. I don't think they're going to have any problem getting their signatures. To abolish property taxes, and around the state, they're raising property taxes again. And so he saw that column and he called me and just talked a little bit about the specific, his specific perspective in Grand Forks. I thought it was worth sharing, but he's mad. I mean, I think the quote was, "I'm so effing pissed that, I'm going to vote for it."
I'm voting for it.
Right. I mean, that's where he's at.
That sentiment, I think, is going to be carried out, follow me through this metaphor. I think there are many people, especially in 2016, that kind of had that attitude about the presidential contest and voted for Trump because of that, because they didn't.
I'm not endorsing it as a philosophy, by the way.
Yeah, no, we're not. But they looked at it and they said the whole system's bad, nothing's changed, everything's awful. I don't particularly think, if you got them in a room by themselves, they'd say, I don't particularly think Donald Trump's a qualified guy. I think he's kind of out to lunch, but that's what the political establishment deserves. And I think there's going to be a variation on that with this property tax vote. And I think what needs to be kept in mind, and my Trump metaphor is a little clunky there, but is that throw the bums out, toss everything to the wind, but it's also throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is a problem. And I can see the frustration in action makes perfect sense. When you throw your hands up and go for solutions, quote unquote, solutions that aren't solutions, that have no nuance, that haven't been thought through, you can always make a bad situation worse.
Yeah.
And I think that's what smart elected officials need to get out and tell voters before this comes on the ballot in November. And we're going to have to watch and see if they do.
And they should start now.
Start right now.
Like you can't wait till June next year and start up a campaign. You got to be doing it now.
And honestly, when Rick Becker comes to your local public library, as is his every right, you should show up and ask him questions. Not confrontational. Show up and say, "Hey, I'm on the city commission. Here's what we're doing with property taxes. I want to talk to this crowd about it."
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong.
You gotta do it.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, not angrily confront, but there's nothing wrong with confronting him with your side of the argument either.
Bring your charts. Is what I'm saying. Nobody
wants people screaming at each other. But I mean, it's a debate. Rebut him. I do not want that ballot measure to pass. I think I don't want local. I as much as I don't like the property tax, I don't think that getting rid of it and having all the local budget decisions be made in Bismarck is a smart idea. I don't think that we have the idea that we could just use the legacy fund or something to pay for it is nonsense. The timeline that the ballot measure sets out for abolishing the property taxes, where we vote on it in November, probably in November next year, and then it's gone in January before the legislature even gets through a full session, is terrible. So all of those things, but
sometimes let's invite either Crotius or excuse me, the tax commissioner or the treasurer or somebody to run through the actual math, because I think that's well worth people saying.
I think so.
Hey, if we got rid of all property taxes,
we're gonna do that.
How fast would it?
We're gonna do that on a future story, on a future episode for sure. But what the other side of that argument though is that, because we saw it, we were debating income tax relief and property tax relief during this last session, and one of the things that come out of that debate from Commissioner Crotius, by the way, was the fact that we have spent $7.6 billion on quote-unquote property tax relief over the last 15 years. The state of North Dakota is currently obliged to spend well over $1 billion, a biennium now, in continuing to fund these schemes to lower property taxes, which have been buy downs of the education mills, buy down of the social service mills, and some of those other things. We have hid a lot of the property tax problem in statewide budget surpluses that were driven by the oil boom. And we've had that luxury, and we've been doing that instead of addressing the problem. My argument is the local governments have very effectively shifted the blame for property taxes to the state legislature. And while,
and the state legislature has accepted it.
And the state legislature stupidly accepted it.
And previous governors, I'll actually give Governor Burgum credit on this. His two predecessors, Jack Dalrymple and John Hoeven, explicitly said they were getting involved in the property tax issue. So when they come back now, when state level officials come back now and say this isn't levied by us, that's literally true on paper, but at the same time, they chose to run on it.
But let's also be clear that some of those state officials weren't around. Like Brian Cross just wasn't around. He wasn't elected back. That's true. As one example. It's depending on which state official you're talking about. We've had some turnover.
And that's good nuance. But for the average voter who's trying to, this is one of the problems with having 14 statewide elected officials, plus a legislature, plus a city commission, plus a county commission, plus a school board, plus a park board, and having, someone who doesn't do this for a living trying to parse through all that.
Who do you complain to? It's like that even, because you get your property tax bill. I get one bill, right? But on that bill is the county and the city and the park board and the school district.
Well, right here in I don't live in West Fargo anymore. I used to, and when I was in the House, I was representing West Fargo. West Fargo School District is going to have another bond referendum in December this year, and it's the fourth one in less than, I want to say, 10 years. I might be getting that wrong, but they had one very recently, and they are doing that, and part of the reason is the school board just reduced the mills by 6. Now, this is getting super in the weeds, but where I could see an example of frustration being, you're a West Fargo resident, you hear the school board's taking down 6 mills, and you're thinking, hey, I got a tax cut. Well, your property tax is probably going to be about even, if not going up, because the reason they did that was, one, they had a savings, so they wanted to give people a break, but everyone's evaluations are going up so sky high because of the real estate market, you're probably not going to see less taxes.
And also, even if your park board does give you a property tax cut, there's no guarantee the county is going to give you a property tax cut. They may raise your property taxes, and again, the taxpayers
and to be fair to them, they can't give you a direct property tax cut. They can increase or reduce the mills. They're choosing to reduce the mills, but that might not result in a tax cut for you. And explaining all of that to an average voter versus, hey, do you want to just ban property taxes? I mean,
right. Yeah. I mean, if you're in politics, if you're explaining, you're dying. And also, let's not forget, in 2012, we had this ballot measure, and the promise that was made, because it failed spectacularly, a similar measure to abolish property taxes. And the argument at the time from the coalition that defeated it was, let the legislature fix this problem. And Governor Hoeven was visible on that in TV ads. And I think that carried real weight, because he was a trusted voice and still is
on TV saying, hey, this is a little too extreme. That gave people pause and were like, oh, John Hoeven.
I think it's still extreme. I think it's still a bad idea. The problem is a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of voters who are like, well, you fooled me once. This is still a problem for me. And there's some basic philosophical arguments too, where I'm 70 years old now. I'm on a fixed income. I'm retired, and I still have to pay the rent to the government, or the government will come and take my home away from me.
I'm still paying a North Dakota mortgage, and it keeps going up every year. After I went on the way to pay this after 30 years. Yeah, I get it.
Philosophically, the idea that you never really own your home is kind of terrible. But this is but to articulate for me how we replace it in a way that's workable.
Well, and by the way, the lefty argument around this, or one of the lefty talking points of this, which is correct, is if you go to a state like South Dakota, like Texas, take a look at those property taxes, because they're worse than ours.
Yeah.
And guess what they don't have? An income tax.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to see, the air gets, squeezed into the balloon somewhere, and other people get squeezed no matter what you do.
I think it's fair to say, how do we want to be taxed? I mean, personally, I like consumption taxes a lot better than I like a property tax or an income tax even. Because I'd rather tax tax me when I'm spending, when I'm engaging in commerce. But even then, then the retail sector doesn't like it because you jack up North Dakota sales tax. In Fargo, everybody's going to go across the river to Minnesota to shop if we jacked up our sales tax. So, even that's problematic. So it's a tough debate. I just don't think that this measure that they're going to put on the ballot is the right one. I think property tax still needs to be in the quiver. But I think local governments need to come. And when I'm saying local, I'm also painting with a very broad brush. We're talking about a lot of people. Your local government in your neck of the woods may be doing a great job. I just know the number of people who are perpetually ticked off about their property tax bills. There is a disconnect between the way locals are governing that drives those property tax bills and how the taxpayers think about it. We got to do something about it. Okay, so the other thing is, this is a little bit of a confusing episode because I have the Burgum news, and we're going to talk about that here real quick, but we're also going to be recording another interview with Senator John Hoeven after this. It's going to be later in the afternoon, and we may talk about Burgum then and have more information about it. But as it stands, as we're talking about this right now, what we know is that Governor Burgum was injured at a basketball. He was playing basketball with his staff. And I don't know. I don't know if that was just a fun thing. I don't know if maybe they were going to film it and put it on social media and maybe juxtapose it with the fact that a couple of the candidates he's running against, Donald Trump, and then ultimately, if he makes it that far, Joe Biden, are very old men who are not exactly what you would call spry.
That's pure speculation, though. They haven't said anything like that.
They haven't, but we don't. I don't know. He
was
playing.
I kind of want to put that on them because maybe that's just a thing they do as a team building exercise.
Maybe I don't know. You're right. That's pure speculation on my part. But he was playing basketball. He got hurt. Went to the emergency room. He's out of the hospital now. They don't know if he could stand, and they don't know if he's going to participate in the debate. The last thing I heard from
he appears to be fine though. He was released from the hospital.
I mean, in terms of health, he's fine. He's not.
Yeah.
He's got a leg injury. He's fine. The question is he fine enough to participate in a debate on a national stage in front of millions of people? And
what they said was he wasn't able to stand, and I'm guessing there is no way, and it's pure Ben Hansen speculation, there is no way he's going to skip this debate. He's going to have to do it no matter what. They've worked so long and hard. He can't afford as a candidate right now to be out of this debate.
Yeah,
I don't think
they might be. I mean, and part of it too, they might be milking like maybe they're not just going to come out and say, "Oh, he's fine" right away, because it's getting him a lot of attention right now, and for a candidate who has struggled with name ID. It's not a bad thing. But, if he's really injured, if you think about it, if he's in a lot of pain, even, can you perform well? Do you want to put your candidate on the national stage? The other thing is, if he's on painkillers, has he been prescribed painkillers? Do you want to be on the national stage in a painkiller situation where, even candidates who are prepped and 100% ready, and they have a little verbal flub, and suddenly that becomes the thing that destroys your campaign. The stakes here are sky high.
I don't know of a nice way to say this, but the Burgum campaign should take it as a compliment I mean it as. If you're crazy enough to run for president, you're crazy enough to do a debate without painkillers, even though you just went to the ER for your leg.
You could own it too. Well,
he'll top it through.
So the other part of it too is when they I know, because even when we do the debates in North Dakota, how everything works, where people sit, what are they allowed to have with them in terms, can they have a notebook, can they have a pen, all those things tend to be negotiated by the campaigns. Now, I do have Perry Schaefer, who's actually going to be our guest on the podcast tomorrow, former North Dakota Republican Party chair. He's in Milwaukee. He's a guest of Republican National Committee woman,
in Milwaukee to watch the debate.
He's in Milwaukee, right? And so he said he was talking with Ronna McDaniel. She's the chairwoman of the National Party. She said it would be up to Fox News in terms of any accommodations, if he gets to sit instead of standing at a podium or something.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is, would he be allowed to do that? Can he stand for 2 hours? And if he can't stand, will they let him sit? And if Fox News is okay with letting him sit, are the other candidates going to be okay with it? because the other candidates may see an opportunity to have one less voice on the stage.
I want to know who's going to say the line. If he can't stand here, how is he going to stand up to China and see if they can get a Twitter moment for themselves? I refuse to call it X, by the way. What I think is actually important here, though, is what is actually important. I am guessing, because Doug is pretty good at doing this, he's going to try and call out the game right away and say, hey, something happened with me personal health-wise that I'm going to be over in 2 weeks or whatever. What we're talking about tonight is who is the best, most qualified person to run the entire country. And so let's look past this. I think it would be the epitome of shallowness that is frequently our politics if the entire conversation around Burgum as a candidate simply became one injury he happened to suffer at the most inopportune time humanly possible. Right before this debate, because I'm sure that's not what his campaign wants to talk about. I'm guessing that's not what he wants to talk about. And really, truly, at the end of the day, whether you love, hate, or simply don't know, as most of the country doesn't, his policies and his candidacy, how he got injured in a way that is going to be temporary, it does not matter. At the end of the day, it just does not. And if that becomes the only meme, it's this, actually, I will compare this a little bit to things like the Dean scream or other things that
George Allen saying macaca or whatever he said.
Well, no, I'm actually going to backpedal on that one because that was inherently racial.
That was a Republican.
That wasn't good. No, I wasn't saying Republican. I'm saying like shallow things that when you look back at them, they're like, oh, Howard Dean got excited and tried to yell, rallying up his troops. Therefore,
or the candidate wore a silly hat at the state fair or something.
Yeah, Obama wore a tan suit. These kind of things where you look back at them, you're like, really?
Somebody told Red Sox fans that they're a Yankees fan or something like that. I mean that.
Yeah, and it
doesn't ultimately matter, but it catches a lot of attention. Doug needed this debate, and I have a feeling that if he had to be carried out on a stretcher onto that debate stage, he's going to do it.
He will. He'd hobble up there if he had to.
So if he's ultimately not on that stage, either the injury was worse than is being reported, or I think there's shenanigans from the other campaigns where they didn't want to allow him some accommodation he needed to be on the stage. I just don't know. And at this point, in a couple of hours, we're going to know a heck of a lot more, and all of this is going to be outdated.
His campaign did put out a lighthearted tweet with a picture of him playing basketball in like the 70s or something, saying it's not the first time we went to the ER from playing basketball. And it's like, Doug, maybe you shouldn't keep playing basketball. I've never been sent to the ER for playing basketball. I played very poorly in grade school, so maybe that's why. But
oh, well, and there is a way to make hay out of it. I mean, there is a way to say, he's a spry sexagenarian. I actually had a friend tell me that Doug Burgum puts the sexy in sexagenarian, which I was like, well, okay. No comment.
All right.
No comment.
All right. Well, Rob, now that you've said that, please never say it again. On air, off air.
I was actually thinking about using it in a column. I think it was kind of a dirtiness but I don't know.
First you're putting the F word in a byline. Now you're putting sexy, Sagittarian. The dirtiness of the Fargo Forum paper with Rob Port as columnist.
Yeah. Well, I am provocative. There is something to be said, though, about him being a vigorous person. I think whether you like it or not, I don't know that it's helpful. Like I think it's depressing if the 2024 election comes down to a choice between super old Donald Trump and super old Joe Biden. I think we could do better as a country. Setting all ideology and everything else aside, we could do better as a country. Joe Biden is too old for that office. Donald Trump is too old for that office.
If there were universal age maximums applied, I'd say sure. But I'm sorry, given the fact that FDR wrapped up like his final 6 years completely in the grips of polio and helped end World War II and a Great Depression, and JFK basically had a back so bad he had to spend whole days in bed and seemed to manage to run the whole. Sure. I think there's this disconnect
Ulysses S. Grant was a functional alcoholic, but I I don't know.
High functioning alcoholism is kind of a requirement in politics. I don't know if you knew, but
well, yeah. I don't know. I don't think you're exactly making the case. I think there's something a lot of voters would find it appealing that Doug Burgum is spry enough to be playing pickup basketball with his staff.
I think there's a bit of a fairy tale that we tell ourselves as voters that one person and their will somehow make the machinations of government work because we don't like the idea of someone who looks older, is otherwise physically frail, or like in the case of FDR, you have to literally hide the fact that he was paralyzed because we need strong men running the country. And sometimes I think we may overemphasize that to our detriment.
I don't know that I agree. I don't know that it has to be the factor. I don't have a problem with it being a factor. Yeah, but that's where I'm at. Hey, we're gonna stop this part of it here. Next up is going to be an interview with Senator John Hoeven, and all the stuff you just heard us say about Doug Burgum being injured by a basketball game. By the time you listen to this, may be obsolete. So if you had to sit through that and you're like, dummies, I already know what happened. I'm sorry, but all right. Interview with Senator John Hoeven next. Here we go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Kuhl, host of the Northland Outdoors podcast. Hey, here in the Northland, we love our time outside. And on the Northland Outdoors podcast, we're going to talk about all of it. Not just fishing, not just hunting, but mountain biking, camping, rock climbing, bird watching, you name it. We're going to have it on the Northland Outdoors podcast. New episodes every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So look for it and join us on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
Okay, so now for the last part of our show, we're going to be talking with Senator John Hoeven, who's actually in central North Dakota, coal country. He was touring the center mine, taking a look at the drag line out there, and of course we've got big things happening with some of our coal industry in the state with Project Tundra, which is a big deal. Although that plays into something that we're going to talk about here in a moment, which is pipelines, specifically carbon capture pipelines, and of course the Dakota Access Pipeline, and our national struggle at times, it seems, to build pipelines. So we're going to talk about all that. But first of all, Senator Hoeven, big debate tonight with Governor Burgum out on the stage. Are you, and by the way, injuring himself overnight? And the question now, I think he's going to be on the debate stage, but you got a prediction? By the time everybody hears this, we're going to know what happened, so this will be obsolete. But any predictions? Do you think Doug's going to make the stage?
I think, I'm hopeful he just twisted an ankle or something like that, and I think that could actually help him. I mean, already this morning on Fox, they were talking about it and talking about him and his record and giving him some good national attention. And even if he has to come up there with crutches because he sprained an ankle or something like that, I think that actually kind of just gives him more attention and could actually be helpful. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that it actually works to his advantage. But I don't know yet. Hope he's okay and hope it works out so it's actually, like, say, a good thing.
I think you're right. And Senator Hoeven, you're an astute and long-time observer of both local and national politics. You've said that you're supporting Governor Burgum's run right now for president. What does he need to do tonight to win at the debate stage, win this round of the nominating contest for Republicans?
Ironically, we start out talking about his basketball injury, and in a way that it's just almost like a continuation. What we're saying there is that he needs to get national attention. People need to understand who he is, what he's about, what he's going to do for them. I mean, at the end of the day, it's almost like a job interview, and he's got to get in front of the American people and give them that job interview and tell him why they should vote for him, what he's going to do to help strengthen our country. And so the more attention he gets in this debate along those lines, that differentiates himself, gets him attention, that's going to be the critical thing for him to get done.
The reason, what prompted me to invite you on is that you had some comments about the Dakota Access Pipeline, and it may actually surprise a lot of people listening to this to understand that even though the Dakota Access Pipeline has been completed and has been moving oil for years now, it's still in legal jeopardy. There is still a significant, a standing legal dispute over it. There is a review that is ongoing that was ordered as a part of that legal proceeding that is being conducted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I think it's unlikely, but the possibility is not zero that this pipeline, which has become vital in many ways to North Dakota's economy, that has been operating safely again for years could be shut down. And so when you talk about like things to do that are good for this country, you know, when we're looking at the Dakota Access Pipeline, we're looking at a lot of the furor over building the Summit Carbon Pipeline. And I understand situations are different and everything else. It seems, Senator, like we really struggle to be able to build things in this country anymore. And in particular, some of this infrastructure that we really do need. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We've got to have infrastructure to move people, goods, and energy safely around the country. And that's the key is we need to build it. It needs to be the latest, greatest technology. It needs to be cost effective and efficient, and it needs to be safe. In the case of the Dakota Access Pipeline, as you said, it's been operating and now for 3 years operating safely and well. It's moving almost 800,000 barrels of light, sweet crude, by the way, the best in the world, from North Dakota to places around this country that badly need it, so we don't have to get it from OPEC or some adversary. I think of all the great jobs, the economic activity, the importance to our economy in terms of not only energy security, but national security. And just, you also have to realize that if we weren't moving it by that pipeline, it would take over 1,000 rail cars a day to move that oil. Now think of that. And that adds about $10 a barrel cost, and it displaces our ability to move our ag products. Saw a recent study where it would cost us like $3 billion to move that in additional cost for moving our ag product because they'd clog up the railway if we couldn't move it by this pipeline. So that shows you how important it is, as well as it being the safest way to move that product to market. So I'm working with the Assistant Secretary of Army who oversees the Corps of Engineers, as well as the head of the Corps of Engineers, General Spellman, to make sure that we get the final approvals in place and that this pipeline continues to operate until we get those approvals and it's signed, sealed, and done.
All right, just for you listening at home, we had to stop for just a moment because the senator had some bad cell phone connection, but we got everything straightened out. So I'm going to re-ask my last question, which was essentially about the carbon pipeline. Now, again, you're in central North Dakota. You're at B&I Coal. Part of the reason why you're there is to talk about Project Tundra, which has been a years-long project. It's cutting-edge technology. It's coming into its final phases. But it's clear to me that carbon capture is becoming something that's very important to North Dakota. But when we look at the Summit Carbon Pipeline situation, which is another company that's not related directly to the Project Tundra, it's a different project. That one's about bringing carbon from ethanol plants further south of us up to North Dakota to put the carbon underground to capture it and store it. There's been a lot of controversy about that, and I guess my question is, we saw recently the Public Service Commission denied them a siting permit. They've now come back and they've reapplied for it. What's your sense about, is that pipeline going to be built, and how important is it to North Dakota?
Well, Rob, we'll see. As you said, that's a different kind of project than what I'm working on today. So I'm up here, as you said, at the center mine with B&I Coal and with Minn Kota Power. And what they're doing is they're going to scrub the CO2 off their emission stream from the coal plant, and then they'll take that CO2 and put it downhole for basically for storage, carbon capture and storage. And so we've put the programs in place for them to do that. Now, these pipelines that our coal plants will be using, Dakota Gasification is doing it, Coal Creek will be doing it. We're leading the nation in doing this, and it's vitally important because it's how we're going to keep our coal-fired baseload electricity going, not only today, but long into the future. And as you know, this country needs baseload in our grid for stability. But the pipelines that we're talking about here, one, are not very long because you're up in coal country. They're going to sequester close to where the plants are for the most part. And again, they're on land that a lot of it is already owned by the coal companies, for instance. So you're not talking a lot of landowners and long pipelines like you are in the case of the Summit project. So the Summit project's a different kind of project. It's also not for our utility industry, for our coal-fired electric industry. It's actually, as you said, for the ethanol industry, and it involves other states, and they have to cross a lot of different land and deal with a lot of landowners in those other states, as well as in North Dakota. So in the case of Summit, it's very, very important that they work with landowners on a voluntary basis, that they're fairly compensated, and that they're not using eminent domain, but that they are making sure that they're working with people in a way that they also understand that they're meeting the safety requirements and letting people know, what those safety provisions are. So the voluntary basis and making sure that they're clear with people on addressing the safety issues and the first responder issues, those are going to be very important if Summit is going to go forward.
And so, Senator, you're saying you would not, and I know it's not necessarily your role as the United States Senator, but you're saying you would not be supportive of them using eminent domain with landowners in either North Dakota or neighboring states to complete that pipeline?
That's correct. They should be working on a voluntary basis with landowners. And you're right. I mean, obviously it's a state and local issue. It's a siting issue. But I think on both, for them to get their project done, I think they've got to work with people on a voluntary basis. And I think they've really got to be upfront on all of the safety issues and really work to make sure people understand the steps that they're taking and how they're addressing not only the pipeline itself and not having any kind of leak, but also first responder issues. And I think both you guys have watched the process, and I think you've seen that those concerns have been raised, and it's very important that the company address them.
I agree with that. And as somebody, I would also like that pipeline to be built because I think it's important for North Dakota. And I agree 100% with that. And I would even argue that this project, it's not the first. I mean, we've had pipelines, carbon pipelines operating in North Dakota for a long time. So this isn't new per se, but it's getting a lot of attention now. And it might be new to a lot of people who haven't really thought a lot about this in the past. It seems really important, given how important I think carbon capture and storage is going to be for North Dakota in the future, that this project be done right and not leave a bad taste in the mouth of people who are watching this and say, oh, they just came in and steamrolled people. That's going to make it harder to do these projects in the future, I think. I mean, it's really incumbent upon them, I think, to be good neighbors and good stewards of this.
That's exactly right. And look, I've been working on this stuff for over 15 years. I started working on this stuff when I was governor because, look, North Dakota is an ag powerhouse for this nation. North Dakota is an energy powerhouse for this nation. It didn't happen overnight. I spent an incredible amount of time working on both of those things. I did for 10 years as governor, and I've done it ever since I'm in the Senate. And it is about driving forward with the latest, greatest technology, cost-effective, dependable energy with the best stewardship in the world. We're leading the way in both in ag and in energy, but you got to do things right, and you got to win people's hearts and minds. You got to do it because with the people, and like you say, it's very important that people see it as a benefit, and that's why I emphasize the voluntary nature and addressing the security issues and being upfront with people and getting them on board. That's the way to get things done.
So, speaking of hearts and minds, Senator, as you well know, nationally, maybe even in North Dakota, there are certainly critics who claim that carbon capture is an unproved science, or they don't necessarily think the pipelines themselves with the carbon leaks could be regarded as safe. I'm guessing you disagree with that, although that is a presumption. What I'd like to know from you is, what role do you think the federal government has in either ensuring that that technology proves out, or creating confidence with the public, if you do think that that is the solution to ensuring baseload coal for our energy infrastructure for the foreseeable future?
Well, yeah, again, back to baseload coal, and like to say, it's nice that we're having this conversation when we're up here at Center Mine. Nobody has a better coal-fired electric industry in a world than we do. I mean, when DGC comes online, and we think that's going to be next year with their project, it will be the largest carbon capture project in the world, and we're producing synthetic natural gas from coal, which this nation badly needs. And this Project Tundra, if we can bring this thing to fruition, that's going to be the first in the world where we've got a coal-fired electric plant that's capturing and sequestering CO2 on a commercially viable basis. This is big stuff. But again, I go back to what Rob just said. We've got to do it right. It's got to be safe, and it's got to be something people support and want. And that's why it's so important that everybody does things right, and that the people of North Dakota are convinced it's something they want. I would mention something else relative to what Bob just said a minute ago. Do you realize that Red Trail Energy, which is an ethanol plant out by Richardson, is already sequestering CO2 off an ethanol plant? And they built a pipeline. Did you hear anything about it? No, because they worked with the people and got it done right, and they had the people on board. Okay, that's how to do things. That's what we have to do with all these projects. And that's what I mean. It is about making sure people understand that it's done right, it's safe, and so that it's something they embrace and want. That's the way to do it.
I actually interviewed the CEO for Red Trail about their project. He was so excited about it. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name now. That's on me. But they were even talking about they've got part of the carbon that they produce being sequestered and stored. I mean, they're talking about expanding it so that they're almost to the point where their entire operation there is carbon neutral. So that's exciting stuff. Talk to me a little bit about Project Tundra specifically, because that's a banner project and has been for a long time. Some of the headlines recently is that it's entering, I think the term was its final phases. What does that mean? I mean, can you give us an idea for people who've been following this for years? When do we reach a point where we say, yes, this was a success, this is something that we can emulate in other places around the country? Are we there yet?
The name you're looking for at Red Trail is Gerald Bachmeyer.
That's him. Yes.
And he's a heck of a guy.
Yes.
He's done such a job. And that whole board of directors, I remember meeting with them in a garage out there at Richardson or Taylor or somewhere. And we're sitting in this little garage and they're talking about building an ethanol plant. And it was when I was governor. I'm thinking, man, I don't know if you guys are going to get her done or not, but I'll sure help. And here they are today, one of the first in anywhere that's actually not only producing ethanol but capturing the CO2. And they just keep doing their thing and doing it better than anyone else and getting it done right. And it's a bunch of corn farmers for the most part. And it's just a great North Dakota story. As far as Project Tundra, yeah, it's a big deal. So Mac McLennan and Minn Kota leading the charge along with BNI Coal. You're talking a project that's well north of $1 billion. And we work with them and the Department of Energy. So there's a variety of things that go into it. It's a certain amount of upfront funding, where the federal government, through the Department of Energy and the State Industrial Commission, pool money with Minn Kota to actually develop the technology to separate the CO2 from the emissions stream. And that's what we call Project Tundra. But then that also correlates into some other programs we've got. Obviously, you're aware of the 45Q, loan guarantees and so forth, because they've got a big investment up front to make. But the net result is they'll be able to produce baseload, and that's the key, baseload electricity, which this country badly needs, and do it with the carbon capture piece. And so I'm up, we went out with the coal miners. We're on that big drag line. We're in the coal trucks. We're in the shop, and then you've got the operators there. I mean, you're talking a lot of great jobs. You're talking professionals who have great pride in what they're doing. And the key is this. We've worked through these different issues, whether it was sulfur dioxide, which we call SOx, nitrous oxide, NOx, mercury. We've taken all those things out, and now this is the big kahuna. We'll be able to reduce the CO2, and our industry is leading the way. This will be the first coal-fired electric plant in the world to do that on a commercially viable, successful basis. And when you think about it, that means baseload electricity, which if we don't get more baseload, guys, you're going to see more. You see all these disasters around the country, whether it's a blizzard or, the fires or any of these things in the summer, the heat. If we don't get more baseload, our grid is becoming unstable. And where are you going to get it from? If we don't have these coal plants, where's that baseload coming from? So again, it's not just that we're an energy powerhouse. We're getting it into the grid in a way that stabilizes it and prevents those blackouts and brownouts. And that's why what they're doing is so important. This is, if you want low-cost, dependable energy with the best environmental stewardship, this is the kind of work that makes that happen.
That's something that Governor Burgum's spoken about too on the campaign trail is talking about
exactly.
like exporting our climate guilt to other countries because we put all these stringent and I don't want to. I'm not using this pejoratively. America produces some of the cleanest energy in the world because we have some of the strongest environmental regulations. And I know sometimes we have a debate about, they go too far or they're intended to specifically put certain industries out of business. I understand all that. I think zooming out from that a little bit, we produce very clean energy in America because generally America is a very good steward of the environment versus a place like China, which is less so. So I think, I guess to me, there's a part of this where you still hear a lot of people who are upset. Frankly, some of the opposition from the Summit Pipeline comes from people who don't think that there's a climate change issue. They don't think that this is anything we have to do something about. It's all a hoax or whatever. Can you speak? When you hear that, what do you think? What's your response to that argument? We don't need to do this because climate change is a hoax and we don't have to do anything about it. How do you respond to that?
There is too much regulation, and it's not common sense. But unfortunately, we have to deal with it. I mean, I fight back against it every day, this over-regulation, and a lot of it doesn't make any sense, and we shouldn't have to deal with it. But the reality is we do. It's kind of like getting in the football game. You can gripe to the ref if you want about the rules. It ain't going to do you any good. You show up, and you got to deal with it. And that's where we are right now. Yes, we need to push back on this ridiculous regulatory burden. It is too much. It is not common sense. And it'd be nice if we could get the country to adopt the common sense we have here in North Dakota, and we fight for it every day. But the reality is we need to deal with it. And so that's why I bring up SOx, NOx, and mercury. You can argue all day long whether or not we should have had to deal with it. Well, we had to deal with it, and we did, and we kept our industry going. And so I look at this as the same way. As I don't always like what we have to deal with. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we still got those coal miners mining coal, and we got those power plants operating those power plants, and those families living out here in central North Dakota, and that we continue to be the solution for this country with that baseload electricity.
Kind of speaking to what you were just saying, Senator, how do you convince, or is there a role for the government? Let's put it like that, since you're coming from the U.S. Senate side of this. Is there a role for the government to convince people who are skeptical of this, of carbon capture, of the need to keep coal online for baseload power, that this is the best solution for them? Because the reason I ask that, because I realize I'm kind of repeating my question from before, but when you're talking about extreme weather happenings right now, what almost happened in Los Angeles with a hurricane, the Maui fires, drought, take your pick. A lot of national narrative and a lot of people are saying that is the result of some kind of a climate change that I'm guessing a lot of folks, frankly, in North Dakota probably don't think. But when you have this clash of both opinions, impressions, and science, I'm wondering, does the government have a role, in providing either a test, or you're speaking to overregulation? Is there the kind of regulation or kind of transparency that you could see supporting or being behind to try and convince or get a kind of uniform consensus? Maybe not 100%, but like get us up to 2/3 or 75% of the country on the same page on energy policy. Do you think that's possible?
Well, Ben, I work on every day on common sense solutions. The role of regulation, it should be certain, it should be dependable, it should be scientifically based, and it should empower the investments that deploy the technologies that produce energy with good environmental stewardship. But it should be common sense. And the federal government's gotten to a place where it's this Byzantine maze of regulation that's holding up the very type of technology development and deployment that's good for our country, that gives us energy security, as well. And energy security is national security. Some of these stupid regulations, we end up importing oil from OPEC or in some cases even Russia, or we're shutting down coal plants and getting our energy from, like I say, other sources that are less dependable. Nobody has the environmental track record of the United States. We should not only be, and you've heard Doug say this, but I think I was saying it before he did. We should not only be energy independent, we should be energy dominant. And that means national security, not only for ourselves and our allies. So yeah, I think the federal government's gone way overboard with this regulatory stuff. I think it's a maze that actually makes it harder for us to do exactly what we're doing. So I try to, on the one end, try to get some common sense and reduce that regulatory burden on the federal end, and at the same time work out here with our guys to help, get the right things in place to help them deploy these new technologies to, like I said, produce energy with the best environmental stewardship. And I will tell you a place that has the regulatory touch about right, and that's North Dakota. I think it's that lighter touch. It's more common sense. We're not perfect, but I'd sure like to see the federal government a lot more like us.
Senator, last question, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I know we've got you stopped alongside the road so we keep the cell phone signal strong. But last question, I kind of look at it like this. I'm really tired of the debate. Oh, is climate change real? Is it not real? Et cetera, et cetera. I guess I zoom out from it a little bit and I say, listen, we know that human activity has an impact on the environment around us. And so if we can develop the mechanisms through which we can control that impact, isn't that a good thing? And I think of it like, for instance, protecting topsoil, right? We know that the farming practices in the past weren't so good about it, and we ended up hurting our ability to farm because we didn't protect the topsoil. So we put in place farming practices. We developed the techniques, we developed the technology to protect it. We developed the technology a lot of ways so that we can use the land, but also protect it for future generations and protect the environment, the waterfowl and everything. We've been doing all this stuff all this time. I don't know why we wouldn't be deploying. When I think of carbon capture, I think of it's just another way in which we are deploying human ingenuity to control our environment for the betterment of humanity. I don't understand why. To me, that's not even a little bit controversial. That's exactly what we should be doing. Is that the right way to look at this?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about common sense, I think that should be something we can all agree on. Let's use common sense in terms of producing more energy, more cost effectively, more dependably from all the different sources, and do it with the best environmental stewardship. But let's not get let's not get ridiculous about it. Let's use common sense. I'm sitting here looking out the window, talking to you guys. I see the Built Young power plant in the distance. I know that that's a very efficient, environmentally sound, cost-effective provider of base load electricity to this country. I want to see it operating for long after I'm around for the next generation, because it's important to our country, not only in terms of the energy it provides, but for the great jobs and economic activity it provides out here in God's country in central North Dakota. And as I look at that power plant, I'm also looking at a beautiful herd of Angus cows grazing on a beautiful pasture. And for all I know, that could be reclaimed land, because you wouldn't know the difference whether it had never been touched or not, because that's how good these guys are. And that's what I'm talking about. Nobody does it better, so let's use some common sense and enable them to continue to produce more energy like they do with the best stewardship of the land and water in the whole world.
Senator, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Good to be with you.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.